Should we talk about this Mark Norman clip?
Yes, it's a. I didn't know who they were talking about, but I assumed.
I think the only thing that leaves me wondering is I can't imagine a time where Kevin Brennan would have had Ian Lara on. I just don't know. No, that's nothing against Ian Lara. That's actually a pro Ian Lara comment. I can't imagine Kevin Brennan having Ian Lara on his podcast. But Ian Lara, a few weeks ago, I wanted to talk about this, but then we didn't do a show. So I'm getting to it now. I haven't heard anyone else cover this. So this might be news to you. Ian Lara was on We Might Be Drunk, and they talk about a New York comedian who does a certain type of show, and I can only think of one candidate for this. But I found Mark Norman's comments very interesting here, and I kind of wholeheartedly agree with him.
Talking me, and he hid whenever I'd be at the cell.
Oh.
He hid, yeah.
Like he ran?
He just knew I'd be, and I didn't give a shit. I was kind of like, what's up, man? I'd see him, and he'd be like, hey, and he'd be like awkward about it, but I was like, I don't give a shit.
Well, that's the bigger man.
Yeah.
Good for you.
But he was shit talking me, and I was like,
Yeah.
all right.
I'm that kind of person. I think that's like the New York too, where I would be like, why'd you say that? Like,
I just knew he was unhinged. I knew he was like a crazy guy, so I was kind of like, this is what he does.
some
Any
people are like
ideas
that where
so far as to who this might be?
Well, it's either Matt or Reese or KB, one of the two.
It's very vague. I can't figure out who they're talking about.
you're like, this person is just unhinged. Where you're like,
Yes.
I'm not even. Some people. Are
It's
like,
not like anything I could say would have gotten through to him. Like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. It wouldn't have registered. So
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I'll just
yeah.
be nice to him and
Yeah,
make
yeah.
him more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There's one guy-
Because it did. It made him more uncomfortable.
Yeah, good. Let him be squeamish. But
Yeah.
there's one guy, I'm not going to say his name, but he's shit on everybody in America.
Say his name. We'll bleep it out.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
That sounded like 4 syllables. That
That was a 4-syllable bleep, you think?
yeah. Sorry, Dat fan, you're off the hook.
and
you're not gonna say his name. He'd like that.
That's
He'd
who
love
my
that.
story was
know.
about.
oh, really?
Yeah.
All right, well,
He'd love
bleep
that.
it.
Oh yeah.
The fact that they both were talking about the same guy and didn't know it.
They're thinking about the biggest asshole in comedy
and they thought
and
the same
accidentally
guy.
stumbled upon the same name.
That's fucking.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
All right, well,
He'd love
bleep
that.
it.
Oh yeah.
But
I'll tell you a story about him too.
he shit on me on.
The other guy's got a story too.
Yeah.
Even the little
Well,
guy.
that's what I'm saying is like, would Ian Lara have been on Kevin Brennan's podcast? I can't imagine why Ian Lara would go on there, but it seemed like Ian Lara just didn't know what the show was. So it is possible, but that's the only thing where I'm like, is this Kevin Brennan? I couldn't think of any other examples. I saw the post on the We Might Be Drunk subreddit, and they kind of came to the same conclusion I did. So
My guess is the story would have to be something like at a comedy club, not maybe like at a show, but like how
right,
Kevin
it's yeah. It seems like maybe some of this stuff happened at the Comedy Cellar or something. But I like how Norman handles Kevin here.
Pod and somebody sent it to me and I listened and I couldn't have cared less. I was just like,
That's how I felt.
Yeah,
I
and
thought
I
it was
see
kind
him.
of funny.
and it was not weird at all. I was like, I don't care, but because it's him. You know, I'm like, he's like an ant. Like, you're nobody. Get out of here.
Well, cut that part out because now he's gonna come for us.
Is
All
he
right.
still doing the thing?
Who the fuck?
I went on his podcast one time. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just like you kind of shoot the shit.
Oh, shit.
And immediately as I sat down, he just started going off like personal attacks on like so many comics. And I was just like defending like literally people I didn't.
That has to be Kevin. That has to be
Right?
Kevin.
Who else would it be? I couldn't think of anyone in New York because I was like, based on this conversation, you would think maybe Red Bar, but Red Bar's not a comic. He's certainly not in New York.
No, a commentator. He doesn't. There's only one person that we know that every comedian hates.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's got to be Kevin Brennan because they're talking about the podcast he's doing where he's shitting on people. Maybe Ty Rivera?
oh, it
But
could
he's
be
not a New
Tyler.
York
No,
guy.
no, he's LA, right? And the other thing is like the fact that they don't mention his name. That's equally fucking with Kevin Brennan, right?
Yes.
Like I love that.
And that's all, and then they knew that's all Kevin Brennan would want for them to
Say
be
my
like,
name.
Oh,
Say my
Kevin
name.
Kevin was mean to us. I love the way they handle it where Norman's like, he's an ant. He's irrelevant. Who
Yeah.
gives a fuck? And this is why, because I've heard comics talk about Red Bar. And they're like, you know what? Like I am actually like afraid of that guy because he's actually funny. And they kind of talk about him with like almost this respect because he is funny. And they're like, I don't really love a lot of the shit he says, but like he is funny. And sometimes he points out shit where you're like, fuck, I do that. You hear when they're talking about Kevin Brennan, they're like, he's just a miserable cunt. And he doesn't have the same balls when you see him in person. He runs and hides like a pussy.
Yeah, and it's just easier to be nice to him because you know that freaks him out. That's
Right.
genius. That's genius by Norman right there.
like personal attacks on like so many comics, and I was just like defending like literally people I didn't even know. I'm like, well, nah, he's like a good person. He's like, I'm like, this is terrible.
Yeah, we should find that episode if we can of KB and that dude.
Yeah, if KB has ever had Ian Lara on, the problem is he deletes or puts on Patreon or whatever all his episodes. So
Yeah,
I couldn't find anything. But if Kevin ever has had Ian Lara on, there's your evidence. There's your smoking gun, I guess. But I don't know if you leave in the comments if you guys have any other thoughts of who it could be. But it seems like there's only one conclusion, and that's Kevin Brennan.
No, yeah, it's got to be KB. FKB.